Hey everyone, and welcome to our time machine here at News Pulse 360. Today, we're setting the dial for 1954, a year that may seem like ancient history to some of you, but trust me, it's packed with events that still resonate today. We're talking about the early days of the Cold War, the fight for civil rights, and even the birth of rock and roll. We'll take you month by month through the key events that shaped this year. From political upheavals to cultural revolutions, 1954 was anything but boring. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a whirlwind tour of a year that helped define the world we live in today. Think of it like this. 1954 was like the middle child of decades. The 1940s with World War II were like the super intense older sibling, and the 1960s, well, they were the free-spirited, rebellious younger sibling. 1954 was sandwiched in between, trying to find its own identity. And oh boy, did it ever.
The year 1954 dawned with the world still grappling with the tensions of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb a few years earlier, and the threat of nuclear war loomed large in the minds of many. In the United States, President Dwight D. Eisenhower was beginning his second year in office, facing pressure both at home and abroad. The Korean War had ended in a stalemate the previous year, and the fight for civil rights was gaining momentum. January itself wasn't exactly a hotbed of headline-grabbing news, but it did see the inauguration of Juscelino Kubitschek as president of Brazil, a nation on the cusp of major change. Sometimes, to understand the significance of a year, you have to look at the quieter moments, the subtle shifts in the tectonic plates of history. And January 1954 was one of those moments. February saw a major development in the ongoing Cold War. On February 10th, the United States Congress authorized a whopping $385 million for the construction of the United States Air Force Academy. This wasn't just about building a school, it was about sending a message. The Academy, which would welcome its first class in 1955, was a symbol of America's commitment to air power in the face of growing Soviet might. Imagine the pressure those first cadets must have felt, knowing they were being groomed to potentially defend their country in a whole new kind of war. This was a time when the world was holding its breath, and every decision, every investment, carried the weight of potential global conflict.
March 1954 brought a glimmer of hope to a world still haunted by the fear of polio. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a massive field trial for a new polio vaccine developed by Dr. Jonas Salk began. Over 1.8 million children, often referred to as polio pioneers, participated in these trials. Can you imagine the anxiety of the parents, the bravery of the children, all putting their faith in this experimental vaccine? Polio was a terrifying disease, capable of paralyzing and even killing its victims, mostly children. The Salk trials were a beacon of hope in a world still reeling from the devastation of disease. The world watched and waited, hoping that science might finally have an answer to this devastating illness.
April 1954 was a month of transitions. In the United States, the Army-McCarthy hearings, a series of televised hearings held by the United States Senate's Subcommittee on Investigations, captivated the nation. The hearings investigated conflicting accusations between the United States Army and Senator Joseph McCarthy. Internationally, the Geneva Conference began, aiming to find a peaceful solution to the ongoing conflict in Indochina. These events, though seemingly disparate, highlighted the complex political landscape of the time. The world was changing, and the old order was being challenged on multiple fronts.
May 1954 witnessed a pivotal moment in the fight for racial equality in the United States. On May 17th, the Supreme Court issued its landmark ruling in the case of Brown versus Board of Education. This unanimous decision declared state-sponsored segregation of public schools for black and white students to be unconstitutional, effectively overturning the separate but equal doctrine established in the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson case. The Brown v. Board of Education ruling was a watershed moment in American history, marking a major turning point in the civil rights movement. While the struggle for equality was far from over, this decision provided a legal foundation for dismantling segregation and paved the way for future progress.
June 1954 saw the birth of a musical revolution. While it wasn't a single event, but rather a confluence of factors, this month saw the release of what is often considered the first rock and roll record, Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and his Comets. This infectious, high-energy tune captured the spirit of a generation yearning for something new, something different from the crooners and big bands of their parents' era. Rock and roll was more than just music. It was a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of youthful rebellion and a rejection of the status quo. Little did anyone know at the time just how profoundly this new genre would shape music and culture for generations to come.
July 1954 offered a glimmer of hope in the midst of the Cold War. The Geneva Conference, which had begun in April, concluded with a series of agreements aimed at resolving the conflict in Indochina. While the agreements ultimately failed to bring lasting peace to the region, they did represent a rare moment of cooperation between the superpowers. The spirit of Geneva, as it came to be known, offered a brief respite from the tensions of the Cold War and raised hopes for a more peaceful future.
August 1954 saw the political career of Senator Joseph McCarthy, the controversial figure who had spearheaded the anti-communist witch hunts of the early 1950s, begin to crumble. Following the Army-McCarthy hearings, which had exposed his tactics to a wider audience, the Senate voted to censure McCarthy for his conduct. While McCarthyism, as it came to be known, continued to have a chilling effect on American society for years to come, the censure marked a turning point in the public's perception of the senator and his methods. The events of August 1954 served as a reminder that even in times of fear and uncertainty, the principles of fairness and due process must prevail.
September 1954 marked the beginning of a new school year, but for many African American students in the United States, it was a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for equality. Despite the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Brown v. Board of Education, many schools remained segregated, and resistance to integration was fierce in some parts of the country. The struggle to implement desegregation would prove to be a long and arduous one, with numerous legal battles and acts of civil disobedience taking place over the coming years. The events of September 1954 highlighted the gap between legal pronouncements and social reality, and the long road that lay ahead in the fight for racial justice.
October 1954 saw a chilling reminder of the destructive power of the atomic age. On October 31st, the United States detonated the first hydrogen bomb, a weapon far more powerful than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki just a few years earlier. This test, codenamed Castle Bravo, sent shockwaves around the world and intensified the Cold War arms race. The hydrogen bomb represented a terrifying leap forward in destructive capability and served as a stark reminder of the stakes involved in the global standoff between the superpowers. The world watched in awe and fear as the specter of nuclear annihilation loomed larger than ever before.
November 1954 saw the United States deeply divided along political lines. The midterm elections resulted in a Democratic victory, with the party gaining control of both houses of Congress for the first time in 2 years. This shift in power reflected the growing discontent with the Eisenhower administration's handling of domestic issues, particularly the ongoing Cold War and the issue of civil rights. The 1954 midterm elections highlighted the growing polarization of American society and set the stage for the tumultuous political battles that would characterize the coming decade. It was a time of great uncertainty as the nation grappled with its identity and its place in a rapidly changing world.
As 1954 drew to a close, the world reflected on a year of profound change and uncertainty. From the landmark Brown v. Board of Education ruling to the development of the hydrogen bomb, the events of 1954 had reshaped the global landscape. The Cold War continued to cast a long shadow, but there were also glimmers of hope, such as the spirit of Geneva and the ongoing polio vaccine trials. 1954 was a year of contradictions, a year that witnessed both the best and worst of humanity. It was a year that reminded us of the fragility of peace, the importance of equality, and the boundless potential of human ingenuity. As we move forward into a new year, let us remember the lessons of 1954 and strive to create a more just and peaceful world for all. Thanks for joining us on this journey through 1954. We only scratched the surface of all that happened, but hopefully you got a sense of just how much this one year shaped the world we live in today. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Let us know in the comments what other years you'd like us to explore. Stay tuned for our next video where we explore another fascinating year in history. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning and keep those curiosity gears turning.